Hey guys, Mark from Gunpla Network, and I'm back with my next part of the G Rescue series on my GM BeamMaster from the High Grade Build Diver series. So, today we're going to be looking at a few modifications. The waist cover, crotch cover area, I guess you would call it. We're going to be looking at some chest vents. I'm going to be taking out the standard filled-in grills and make them some nice-looking mesh. And yeah, let's crack on with it. So, first up, I've got the GM Type C crotch cover. Now, obviously, it's kind of the reverse, here. There should be a peg at the bottom and a hole at the top. What I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to use my nippers, pin vise, and I'm going to try and fix this up a little. No guarantees. I could screw it up completely, but there's always glue for that sort of thing. So, first up, the red piece is removable, but I'm going to leave it in there to line it up. I'm going to just trim off the and I've lost my words. Sorry, I'm going to trim down the, piece that was coming out of there. Next up, I'm going to try and widen the hole here, or the existing, socket for that to go into, but I don't know if that's going to work. So you just need a slightly larger drill bit than the the actual piece that you're trying to get it in for. There, and that's the hole widened out without breaking it, luckily. Now I need one to match the nub, I guess, or the piece sticking out, and drill into the red one. Now, don't worry about that if it's slightly not level, because I'm kind of at the mercy of the pieces here to make them line up. So I'm almost drilling on top of the existing piece that was there. But I don't want to be drilling too far up, because then I have the risk of slipping and the drill piece could go through and create a hole in that V cover. So we want to keep it low and, into the thicker piece where you've got more room to work, or the deeper piece. So, drill that in. Okay, so now you'll notice that though, when you do it like that, the top overhangs, which is fine over the waist joint, because the waist cover will help hide that. But then you're like, well, the bottom piece, we'll get to that later. So there you see the two holes now widened out. And that should fit. I think I'm going to be slightly off center with this, but I can correct that later. And that gives us, it's just a slightly different look, different level of detail. The covers will still fit in. Okay, next up, we've got the vents on the chest. Now, the problem is with those vents, yeah, sure, you could scrub them out a little, but there's no detail behind them either. I think they're just a little boring. So what I'm going to do, you can see the little piece of white mesh I've got here in the background. This is actually Tamiya mesh for RC cars, and it's made of plastic or polystyrene, the same as the rest of the kit bits are. So I think if we replace the vent slats with mesh, like I did on my Gundam Mark II MG kit for my GBWC entry this year, it'd make it look so much nicer. So what you want to do is we need to cut out all that, and I find the easiest way will be to drill with a pin vise piece around, create some holes, slice it out with either nippers or your knife, and then use the file to file them down. So just remember, when using your pin vise, try not to slip. Either use your knife to create a insert point, or carefully drill in. Don't drill too close to the edges. You don't need to get this perfect, because you're doing it in 3 stages of cleaning out the vents. First, you're creating some holes to, just be able to get your hobby knife or saw or nippers in there. And then once you've basically cleaned around with your hobby knife, you will then use a file or a sanding stick or sandpaper to smooth out the rest. If you go too close to the edge of the vents, you risk breaking them or making them fragile, and they'll collapse in on themselves, because remember, this is just thin plastic border around the edge. We're actually drilling out the solid part in the middle. It could be about half a dozen 8 holes, depending on the size of the piece you're working with. Now this is the same principle. If you just want to add a mesh detail, I don't know, to the back of a Zaku leg or Gelgoog or something like that, draw the outline first, drill around it, clean it out, and then glue the mesh in from the inside of the piece. Okay, so what we're going to do now is take the hobby knife, very, very, very carefully, guys, with this part. I was so scared of slipping, I was going to, you know, amputate a finger. We all know, we've all cut ourselves before these things, even if they look blunt or damn sharp, so just make sure you are ultra careful. And probably, unlike me, cut away from yourself. So once you've got your holes, just start cutting, you know, pushing with your hobby knife very carefully. Do not cut the outside part of the vent. You need to just kind of twist it around and start creating little holes. If you have a fine pair of nippers or scissors, you might be able to use that, but I think the hobby knife worked easily enough for me. So we're just going to keep cutting around. There you go, until we're almost done. We're going to use the file. So this file was, I mean, you can get hobby files from places. I think this was from my local automotive store a few years ago. I just walked past, or my hardware store, and they had a set of jeweler's files, they can also be called. They come in about 10 different sizes and shapes, all roughly about the same, you know, thickness and things, so they're quite small. So yeah, jeweler's file, hobby files, that'll help you out there. And then just sand it back to the point where you've got, you might need to do a little bit more knife trimming, a bit more filing, but remember, leave a thickness of border around, do not collapse those vents. So now what we've done, what I do is you've cleaned all the vent up. I like to take the mesh sheet, lay the mesh down, trace a little line around the outside of it, and then cut it out from there with your nippers or a knife, quite thin. And what you want to do is start with some overlap, because you need to trim this down to get it to be able to fit inside the border. If you start too small, obviously you're just wasting it. You're losing minimal amounts when you cut it down. So you need tweezers, nippers, hobby knife, and the vent piece or the leg piece, whatever you're doing it with, but I'm using a chest vent piece. So what we want to do first is line it up. Now, when you try to line it up, try and have an even shape. Obviously, this is a slightly angled vent, but you can see it almost fits inside there. I've just spurred another piece I need to smooth out. Because remember, looking in, these are quite decent sized holes in the mesh. You're going to be looking straight inside. So you can see if there's an imperfection there. Okay, grab your mesh again. Now, that kind of almost fits perfectly, but if I was to push that in, it would be flexed, maybe? This will be the most tedious, time-consuming part, guys. So you may need to trim that down a little. Remember to trim evenly. You can either use your knife or the nippers. Like I said, this stuff was plastic. Hey, you can get metal mesh if you can find it in the right sizing, but this was Tamiya RC car mesh, and you can get this from your local hobby store, or like I said, USA and other places. Gunpla, maybe not as popular, but I'm guaranteed you'll have an RC store somewhere and they probably sell this. You get 2 sheets of a decent size in there, and this probably lasts you quite a while. So trim it down and then realign it up with the vent again and see if it fits. So when you've trimmed it back enough and you line it up, you want to take your extra thin cement, not the thick cement, because we don't want to leave big glugs of cement everywhere, and the extra thin will run off a little and it's much less noticeable and less to clean up. Because this is like a plastic mesh, not a metal, it will actually bond or melt the two pieces together, which is what we want. So just run it along the edge. Careful not to knock it out of place, because then you'll be trying to stuck either recutting it all and trying again, or fitting a piece of mesh which is now sticky as hell back in. So I usually do this a couple of times. As you can see, I've just lost it, so use your tweezers, not your hands, to reposition, because you want this resting kind of flat in the vent, not pushed inwards, not pushed outwards, not flexed, just flat, for the best look, I think. Just use your tweezers to position, add a little more glue, and that's it. Now, it doesn't look great now, maybe, but once it's all primed up and painted, it'll be fantastic. Okay, guys. Now we're going to look at another one. This is a BMC Danmo tool. I've got the 0.2 and 0.4. It comes in 0.3, 0.6, and 0.5, 0.8, I think, something like that. It goes up in increments. Essentially, it's got two sides. And what you use this tool for is creating a... you can turn a seam line or a join line into a panel line. Now you can do that with your knife blade and sanding sticks. I've done that once before. It's really hard for me to get an even result while I'm doing it. This tool is pricey, but I feel worth it for what you'll save in stress. And all you do is take like the chest piece here, one side of it. I'm going to use the 0.4. And then what you're going to do is just run it along the edges. And what it does is it creates a 0.4mm drop or indent in the line, and when you join it back together, it looks like it's actually meant to be there and not just where the plastic joins together. So yeah, that's the BMC Danmo tool. So now, as you can see, I've been around all of the edges, and that's given it a neat little effect. So when you push it after a light sand, don't sand too heavily or you just destroy the work you did with like 1200 grit just to tidy it up. Probably need a bit more work on mine, but there you go. It gives it an actual, like it's actually a panel line that is meant to be there. And there you go. When I paint, what I would probably do is, the vents will obviously be painted separately, you're thinking red at this point. Behind the mesh, you can see through and it looks like a flat surface. What I'll do, I will probably, I don't know, I might paint that gold or silver or something frame-ish coloured behind there. And that's it, guys. So yeah, that's your seam line into a panel line, the mesh vent modification, quite easy. And yeah, hope you enjoyed that. Alright, bit of a quicker part of G-Rescue today. Thanks very much for joining me, and I'll be back with another part later on. Bye bye.